Israel is scrambling at the 11th hour to shift the outcome of a draft UN Security Council resolution that has been closely connected to US President Donald Trump's so-called Gaza peace plan. The US-led draft now includes text about a credible pathway to Palestinian statehood. That clause has triggered alarm inside Israel's government and set off a flurry of diplomatic tug-of-war at the UN. On one side, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet remain firmly opposed to any measure that could lead to Palestinian statehood, their public stance unchanged. He said our asserted opposition to a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River stands firm and has not changed in the slightest. Meanwhile, his war cabinet is under pressure from hardline ministers who view any concession as a weakening of Israel's position ahead of elections expected in 2026. On the other side, the United States continues to press for passage of the resolution. The text endorses a two-phase approach. First, authorizing a transitional administration in Gaza plus an international stabilization force made up of Arab and Muslim-majority countries. Second, after reconstruction and reforms, opening a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination. The US argues that adoption of the resolution is essential for getting the ISF operational. As one US official put it, failure to back the resolution would be, in effect, a vote for continued war and for the influence of the very militant groups Israel opposes. But Israel vigorously objects to both the substance of the plan, especially the pathway to statehood, and the fact that Israel may be compelled to host the ISF or cede a degree of sovereignty. The Israeli government is refusing to allow certain countries, including Turkey, a key mediator in the Gaza ceasefire talks, to participate on the ground, citing Turkey's criticism of Israeli actions and recent warrants for Israeli officials. The draft resolution's optics illustrate the complexity of the moment. According to the text, the ISF would assist in securing Gaza's borders, protecting civilians and supervising reconstruction efforts. The transitional administration would operate until at least end of 2027, possibly longer with extensions. Crucially, though, the text signals that once conditions allow after reform of the governing authority in Gaza and reconstruction milestones, a credible pathway toward Palestinian statehood may open. This phrasing triggered the sharp backlash in Israel. In the corridors of UN diplomacy, the dynamic is fluid. The United States isn't the only major player drafting text. Russia has floated a counter-proposal that rejects immediate establishment of the Board of Peace, the name being used for the transitional governing entity, and instead urges the UN Secretary-General to submit options for deploying stabilization force. Russia's version gives greater emphasis to having Gaza and the West Bank reintegrated under the authority of the Palestinian Authority and makes clearer reference to Palestinian statehood. The presence of competing drafts highlights how the global fault lines in the Middle East remain alive in the UN chamber. On the ground in Israel, the political arithmetic is intense. Defense Minister Israel Katz and other right-wing ministers have issued public statements warning that any support for statehood would provoke deep instability. Katz, serving since November 2024, has taken a hard line in his role and is seen as pushing for maximum Israeli leverage in Gaza's post-war phase. Amid the coalition politics, the prospect of Palestinians achieving statehood, even down the road, is being treated as a red line. Beyond Israel and the UN, several Arab and Muslim majority states are signaling alignment with the US text. A coalition of 8 nations, Qatar, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Jordan. The UAE and the US issued a joint statement calling for swift adoption of the resolution, stressing that a UN mandate is essential for the ISF to receive troop contributions. Pakistan has formally endorsed this step, joining the bloc in urging the Security Council to act quickly. Yet even among those states, there are caveats. Diplomatic sources indicate that Pakistan and others insist the resolution must reaffirm the Palestinian right to self-determination, prevent further annexation, and ensure Gaza and the West Bank remain a unified entity. These concerns emerged as the text underwent informal review. China and Russia, among the permanent members of the Council, raised objections, arguing the ISF's mandate must clearly be under UN supervision, not imposed by a single power. Meanwhile, Palestinian factions, including Hamas and other resistance groups, are strongly rejecting the US draft resolution. They view it as an attempt to impose a new form of foreign control over Gaza. They object to the transitional administration and the ISF on the grounds that these would institutionalize international oversight of the enclave and potentially limit Palestinian freedom. Some are calling on Algeria, which currently holds a non-permanent seat on the Security Council, to block the text. As Israel pushes back and negotiations stall, diplomatic urgency is building. The resolution may command 9 out of 15 votes to pass, but it must avoid a veto from any of the 5 permanent members: China, Russia, the UK, France and the United States. With China and Russia having already broken the so-called silence period of informal consultations, the risk of veto remains real. One senior UN diplomat said that the divisions in the Council mean this will take longer than Washington expected. Israel, for its part, is making last-minute efforts to alter the language or halt key elements of the resolution. At the same time, the Israeli government continues to emphasize its objective of demilitarizing Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu made clear Hamas will be stripped of its weapons, either the easy way or the hard way. He tied this to his broader narrative of Israeli security, rejecting any deal that preserves Hamas's military capability or allows full Palestinian statehood west of the Jordan River. Observers say the Israeli resistance stems from both security concerns and internal coalition dynamics. Some hardline ministers fear that endorsing statehood would open the door to broader territorial concessions, undermining Israel's control and Israeli political stability. They view the UN resolution as a pivot point. If the international governance regime in Gaza leads to a two-state outcome, Israel risked having to deal with a new neighbour, albeit one transitional in nature. On the diplomatic side, the United States is pushing the opposite narrative, that without UN-backed governance and stabilisation, Gaza will remain a fragmented war zone, susceptible to revival of hostilities and militant rule. The US emphasises the resolution's text is aligned with the ceasefire that was reached on 10 October between Israel and Hamas after 2 years of war, during which nearly 70,000 Palestinians were reportedly killed. The US argues that now is the time to make structure out of the war's end, consolidate the gains and prevent another explosive flare-up. Who will command the ISF? Whose participating countries will deploy troops, and what operational mandate will it have, especially whether it will operate independently or under Israeli military coordination? What will be the role of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, and how will it be integrated with or override Hamas's de facto control? Whether the transitional administration will function as a sovereign authority or remain under international oversight until statehood is triggered. How the credible pathway to Palestinian statehood is defined, especially its timing, legal form and legitimacy for both Israel and the Palestinians. The UN draft is being closely watched by donors and reconstruction agencies. The World Bank has signalled its support for the US text's governance framework because it would provide a legal and institutional architecture for reconstruction and financial engagement in Gaza. Without clear UN authorization, agencies say reconstruction efforts risk being stalled. Meanwhile, inside Israel, the domestic politics remains volatile. With the 2026 election horizon approaching, coalition partners are increasingly vocal. They see any shift toward Palestinian statehood as a potential existential threat for the governing bloc. The optics of Israel conceding a path towards statehood are being treated as a political gamble. On the Palestinian side, rejection of the draft is also anchored in distrust of international oversight. Gaza's militant factions argue the Transitional Authority and International Stabilization Force amount to displacement of Palestinian sovereignty, not real self-determination. They fear that the pathway clause is a placeholder for delay and subordination rather than immediate statehood. As the week proceeds, diplomats expect amendments to the US draft before any vote is scheduled. The outcome of the Security Council vote will not only shape Gaza's future governance, but also set a global precedent for post-conflict institutional intervention, UN peace operations architecture, and the broader quest for a two-state solution. Israel is resisting the language of Palestinian statehood. Embedded in the US draft resolution, the Palestinians and their regional supporters are rejecting what they see as international control, and global powers are competing inside the UN for influence over the next phase of governance in Gaza. The coming days could determine whether the war's end becomes a moment of transition towards self-determination or simply a rewrapped status quo under new international oversight. In this moment, the lines drawn at the UN and across the region matter almost as much as the lines that divided combatants in Gaza. The difference may determine whether reconstruction and governance open a genuine new chapter or whether the cycle of conflict simply resets.